in the kitchen. They're having their argument, and this freaking light is coming in the window. I kept noticing it after talking about it last week. Let me hit you with a vocabulary term: numinous. I felt like the light was numinous. It was evoking a divinity. And I kept thinking how these scenes like are being, the light of the Lord is like shining in, yet it's through shutters and it's blocked. And
right. So is that like he's watching and doesn't agree with some of the things that are happening within there?
I don't know, man.
Welcome, friends, to episode 199 of the Ink to Film podcast, where we read the book and then see the movie. I'm James.
And I'm Luke.
And this week we discuss the second half of Bruce Miller's 2017 series, The Handmaid's Tale. I'm sure you heard the emphasis on the 199 in that intro. We're coming up on our 200th episode, and I just cannot believe it. I think at the top here we should just thank everyone for listening. Anywhere along the journey, if you've checked it out, thank you. And we're so excited to see what 200 more might bring.
Absolutely. And speaking of that, if you haven't had a chance to write in yet, we've gotten some great feedback. We asked in the last couple episodes for people to write in and share like a favorite episode or a favorite moment from the podcast. And if they wanted to, they could talk about where their lives have gone since they started listening. But that's optional. If you don't want to do that, that's totally cool. I get it. But yeah, we'd love to just like hear what your favorite episode is or your favorite moment on the show. Write those into us. We'd love to get a few more, and we'll read them on the episode next week.
Next week, can't believe it's 200. But this week we are covering The Handmaid's Tale, the second half of the series.
Right.
We've now wrapped up the series, this first season, so. Mm-hmm. It's going to be really interesting to dig into some of these nuances we couldn't fully dig into maybe last week.
Right. I there were so many things that I was talking about that I was like, James knew all along.
Yeah, exactly. What was your initial reaction to it? Did the show hold up? I know you really liked the first half. Did it continue on that same path? Did you like it more maybe?
So the second half of this show diverged from the book a lot more significantly than I think the first half does. Like there were changes, sure, but there was big expansions of material here in the second half. A lot of stuff that with especially some of the side characters that we just didn't get in the book. And then even with our main character, June, quite a bit more. I think the show continues to be a beautiful show. It is expertly crafted, excellent actors and giving us just stellar performances. So, I mean, what's not to like there, right? Like it's a very engaging, entertaining show. It's dealing with subject matter that is timely, that is, unfortunately always going to be timely as long as sort of far-right repressive politics are a sort of force to contend with in our country and around the world. And that's exactly what's going on in this show that just turned up to a few notches, maybe past what we see in real life. Unfortunately, not as many as you might wish for. And all that comes together to make a really engaging, harrowing at times, horrific watching experience. And I'm really enjoying it. I'm very excited for season 2. But yeah, there's a lot to talk about here in these 5 episodes, and I'm definitely interested to get into it with you.
Yeah. Generally, would you say that like the changes and the things that were added, did you lean into the I liked the changes, or did you lean into the it started to bog things down for me?
The general direction of the show is different than the book. I can feel it building out into a larger world where it's going to tell bigger stories in a further season. I'm not sure they knew they were going to get a season 2 here, but it felt like they were directly leaving the door open for that possibility and giving themselves plenty of space to play in a multiple season format show. And I can't blame them for doing that. It does change the story in a pretty significant way, and I enjoy it. It's not the only way to tell the story. I go back to what you said last week, like there could be a stellar miniseries, limited run, 6 episodes, 8 episodes, something like that, version of this story that is a lot more faithful to the book. And maybe if you're a book purist, would appeal to you even more. I think that would probably be excellent, but the show doing what it is doing, I think is still good. Now, all of that is said with the caveat of, I haven't seen the later seasons. I have heard some rumblings from some people who maybe feel like the show has lost its way somewhat. It's difficult for me to say. I haven't seen them. Clearly, they're going well beyond the material of the book, so whenever that happens, there's a chance that the new direction will feel at odds with the original source material, and if that's what goes on, I totally get it, but I don't have that experience, so Just be aware. Only seen the first season.
I do love that you're like engaging with like tiny breadcrumbs of information that maybe people feel a certain way, and like who knows like what you're at. Like,
I don't know. Would I even agree with them if I'd seen? I don't know. Yeah. What was your experience like watching this first season now that you've seen the whole thing in its entirety? I know you've seen, I think, up to the most recent season, right?
Right.
So coming all the way back to the beginning, is it kind of like Game of Thrones, like coming back and watching season 1 of Game of Thrones and reliving some of the initial things that made you fall in love with it?
It really kind of is. Like, I think that my viewings are always enhanced by having read the source material and understanding maybe some of the nuances even more than what you can get. And sort of just like, because I was just watching it as a casual viewer when I watched the first season. I was watching week to week, but it wasn't like, I wasn't digging into every little detail, but as you get those details from the source material, you can then bring that knowledge to the next time you view it. And I really did this time. I felt like I was able to get more of the pinpoint on what the story was trying to say. And you mentioned how like so much has changed, and a miniseries would be an interesting exercise, but at the same time, the way that this season ends is kind of the same way as the book, in the fact that it's like this ambiguous ending where like there's greater threats that are going on, but this is this one experience from this one person for a slice of their time in this. So we don't know where it ends up. We don't know where it's going. Like if there was a situation, like if they changed it and at the end of the first season, she just gets away and she's in Canada with her family and everything's great, and like they topple Gilead or something, that would be completely different. But they sort of, if it did get canceled and there was only this one season, I think it would have been like a really serviceable adaptation with obviously notable changes.
So I think the thumb is pressed on the scale on the side of she gets away, or she's for different reasons we'll talk about. Maybe when we get to the final episode, we should save some of this discussion. But I generally agree with you. It was set up in a way to where if they had been canceled or something, like this first season would hold up as an adaptation. It ends basically in the same place as the book with some variations, which we can talk about when we get to that episode. Yeah, well, I don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves.
Right, yeah. There is a couple things that we didn't address last week that I feel like we can loop back to. One of them being, I wanted to mention that in 2019, The Handmaid's Tale was ranked 25th on the Guardian's list of the 100 best TV shows of the 21st century.
Wow.
So pretty, I mean, like, make of that what you will. It's just a list on a website. But
it's a list someone made, but it's The Guardian. I guess that's a fairly respected...
Yeah, it's cool to think that people who are writing articles like this feel that it's that significant. And I would say it probably is in the top 25. Yeah. Like, it's fantastic. I think
it's an Emmy winner. Like, I think it's deserved.
Definitely. Another thing that we didn't talk about is Elizabeth Moss is also a producer on this show. So to have her sort of like take ownership of the show in that way as well, I think is very cool. And I think she, as time goes on, she starts to direct episodes as well, and really starts to make it her own in a lot of ways. And that brings me to a subject that we didn't even touch on last week, which is Elizabeth Moss is a Scientologist.
Right.
We all know of the scandals that have come from Scientology, I feel like. But I mean, just like I looked into it a little bit. I hadn't up to this point. I always felt like it was weird because Elizabeth Moss is portraying a character that's being suppressed by like a religious, very oppressive force, and then like to think of what Scientology can be viewed as and is viewed as most of the time. I don't know. It's people. I read a quote from Elizabeth Moss, and she talks about how Basically, the Daily Beast asked her to clarify her thoughts on sexuality because of Scientology being sort of having a stance against homosexuality. And this is the quote that she gave. And I think she's tiptoeing around things, obviously, a little bit, but tell me what you think. Quote, "It's a lot to get into and unpack that I can't do here," she explained, "but that is not my bag. I am obviously a huge feminist and huge supporter of the LGBTQ community. I believe so strongly I can't even tell you in people being able to do what they want to do, to love who they want to love, to be the person they want to be, whoever that is. To me, it's a huge reason why I love doing the show. That's all I can say. I can't speak to what other people believe. I can't speak to what other people's experiences have been. That's where I stand, and the only place I can speak from is my own."
Yeah.
And whenever I'm happy to hear her say those things, but I'm always wondering, because it feels like there are people who are in Scientology are always tiptoeing. I always wonder, is it this threat that if they step out of line, some like tragedy will befall them, or they'll be canceled, they'll be blacklisted in the industry and that sort of thing. So I don't know. There's a lot going on there, and I want to get your thoughts.
Yeah. That's a tough subject, you know. Scientology is not a religion I know a ton about. I know a little bit. I've researched some stuff. I listened to some podcasts that talked about it. I know that it has been accused of a lot of wrongdoing over the years. It is a highly litigious organization that often goes after critics online. I saw that they were like petitioning to have search results on Google remove any like criticism from top search results when you like Google Scientology. So they're incredibly controlling of their reputation, which is a big red flag for me. And when you look into it, there's a lot of cultish behavior. You see pressure for members to separate themselves from anybody in their social circles and family who might be critical of the church. There's a lot of pressure to sort of conform to the in-group, and reports are coming out that it is sort of abusive and or exploitative of its members, right? Like whether for financial gain for somebody or for who knows what. That also is all being said with the veil of secrecy that sort of surrounds it, right? Like if you're not in it, it's really hard to know exactly what's going on. You get these stories from people who have left the church, but they're widely condemned by the people who are in the church, and they're called liars. I tend to believe the people who've left because they don't have a lot of good reasons to lie about this sort of stuff. And you see certain trends start to crop up. Now, all that being said, the same argument could be leveled at many different religions. There is different groups within Christianity. It's all over the place. There's all kinds of toxic behavior that goes on, abuse that goes on, pressure to conform, all that same stuff I just talked about is present in many different religions. It's one of the reasons I'm agnostic and I don't subscribe to any particular religion, but many people do. And I think a lot of people's experience with their religion is that the people they know and interact with are positive influences in their life and help give them meaning that they're looking for. And I'm sure in Elizabeth Moss's situation, I'm not sure, I guess, I want to grant her the benefit of the doubt and say that she's probably interacting with people within the organization that she feels very positive about. And it's providing something for her that she wants. And like she said in that quote, her experience has been a good one. Now, she is also a celebrity face of Scientology, which means she's going to be isolated from anything negative because she is a huge recruitment tool for the organization. This is something that they're famous for doing, right? With Tom Cruise and other high-profile
Will Smith,
celebrities.
I believe, right?
Yeah. It's even like in their doctrine is about like using celebrity to further the word of Scientology and all this stuff.
Well, and that's why you hear a lot of like people in LA and honestly anywhere with creatives and specifically actors. They get sucked in because it's like this like.
Well, the entertainment industry in particular is one that Scientology is very interested in, right? And using that to spread their spread the word of Scientology, I guess. So again, I don't know a ton about it, but I do know a little. And it's enough for me to say that even if I disagree with an organization that someone belongs to, it doesn't mean that I can't enjoy the work that person does, especially given the circumstance of, like, we don't know what Elizabeth Moss's journey is, and we don't know what it will be. We don't know if she'll always be a member of the church. Maybe she will, but we don't know that.
Right. That's the other thing is, like, there are people who get into it early. Yeah. They're indoctrinated, and then they get to but then they get to this point of celebrity, and they get to this status that they were looking for from this organization, and then they feel like I said, they can't leave because of implications, because of, like, some of the stories that come out, you know, like, people are
reprisals.
Like, all kinds of stuff that seems really sketchy, and, like, I don't know, I wouldn't want to be associated with it personally, and, like, it's just one of those things that I've heard plenty of stories. I've seen video of people try to go speak to people at the Scientology compounds and things like that, and they're just, like, completely waved away. Not a lot. It's like this most, and then there's stories of people being, like, I don't know, just, like, kept in these buildings for, like, days on end and stuff. They can't leave, and I don't know, scary stuff, because it is cult-like behavior.
There's this veil of secrecy around it, and it's happening. It's a modern organization that's happening right now. But again, it's also like there are plenty of other organizations doing shady shit in America, so they're not alone. I guess I'll give this small anecdote too, just because it makes me think of it. So Scientology, the Church of Scientology, also runs a contest called the Writers of the Future contest. And this is a pretty well-known contest in the sci-fi fantasy writing community. L. Ron Hubbard was a science fiction writer, who the founder of Scientology. And it is literally called L. Ron Hubbard's, Writers of the Future or something like that. It's branded that way. They do say that there is this supposed firewall that separates the church from the contest, and that if you are a winner of the contest, you won't be approached to join the church. They do this big ceremony where they bring in the winners and they award the cash prizes, but it's kind of wrapped in some of the trappings of Scientology, right? And there's an association. And I didn't know all of this initially, and I did submit short fiction to it a few times. I ended up getting a silver honorable mention for a story, which is like the one step away from being a finalist. But I've chosen to not send any more material to them. Basically around, I forget what year it was, but a lot of former winners started coming out on different forums in the writing community and sharing their experiences, and come to find out that firewall was not as strong as you might think, and there was some pressure.
If you think that you're not on a list after winning something like that,
Yeah, people getting approached, maybe there was people within the organization who were behaving in ways that felt inappropriate. I can't recall all the specific details, but it was enough for me to go, I don't want to be associated with this. I wanted to give them the benefit of the doubt at first. There's not a lot of paying opportunities in the short fiction space. I want a Writers of the Future type contest to exist. I think it's a cool idea, right? To showcase new writers and to have a decent cash prize. That's not something there's a lot of. But it's a shame because, as far as I know, this is the only one like it. I don't blame anyone if they still submit to it. You know what I mean? Like, you can take their money. There's been people who've gotten first prize and, like, used their speech at the event to, like, shit on Scientology, like, either directly or indirectly. Like, you can do what you're gonna do with it. And I can't blame you if you want to go after that money. I'm not gonna blame you. But personally, I no longer submit to them. So that's kind of where I'm at with it in general. I also wouldn't submit to a, like, overtly Christian organization, right? Like, if its whole publication was wrapped in being Christian, I wouldn't want to be associated with that either. Right. So that's just how I am with most organized religion, because I do tend to find it to be exploitative, or has the potential to be.
Yeah, that makes me think about maybe the role that Scientology has for Elizabeth Moss at this point too. It's like, who knows if this show isn't a commentary on some of that stuff, because I don't know that you can't separate the two. Like, when I think about the show and I'm watching it, and if it pops in my head that she's a Scientologist, I'm like, man, like, this organization could be doing some of this crazy shit, and, like, just the association is there.
And I'm sure it's different enough to where she can separate some of it, because it's like it's not like wrapped in the same Christianity
Right.
you know, stuff that the show tends to be. And again, I don't know exactly what goes on behind closed doors because you have to be in those circles, and you know, clearly I'm not. But like,
Yeah.
I guess I do think of it when I watch her performance a little bit, but I still am very impressed, and I'm able to enjoy it, and I'm able to enjoy her work. It's holding the individual separate from the organization. Now, if she, you know, if something comes out about her specifically being responsible for some abuses and, you know what I mean, illegal, anything like that were to come out, hold her responsible. But for now, I'm willing to give her the benefit of the doubt, I guess.
Yeah, it's one of those situations where it's like separate the art from the artist, and you know, like people. I know this isn't the most drastic case of needing to do that, but I mean, like I feel the same way when I watch it. I feel like I'm able to just like enjoy her performance and enjoy the show and give her the benefit of the doubt. But it is interesting to think about the association that's there
and the words that are coming out of her mouth, right? Like she's like, "I'm a feminist. I support these rights." You know what I mean? So she's saying the right things. Maybe that's at odds with people in the organization because there are people who subscribe to religions and have beliefs that are at odds with the religion, you know? So this can happen, and who knows what that'll lead to down the road. Tough to say.
Yeah. Well, do you have any other general things you'd like to talk about, or should we jump into the plots?
Let's jump into the plot. We spent a lot of time talking about Scientology, so
yeah,
hopefully people
we're
stuck
definitely
with us.
Flagged on a list at this point as well. Too.
Yeah, we'll probably be excluded from Google search results. I don't know. Already are.
Episode 6 is called A Woman's Place. When Mexican trade delegates visit the Waterfords' home to evaluate the effects of the Gilead cultural movement, June is asked about her experience. She lies, saying that she is happy. The handmaids are taken to a function to demonstrate Gilead's success, illustrated by a parade of commanders' children to whom the handmaidens have given birth. The next day, June privately tells Mexico's ambassador the truth about Gilead and asks for her help, but the ambassador is unable to do anything. However, June is told by the ambassador's assistant that Luke is alive and a message can be sent to him. A flashback details Serena and Fred's life at the beginnings of the Gilead movement, when Serena was a conservative cultural activist with passion and intelligence equal to her husband's. It is revealed that she wrote a book about her beliefs titled A Woman's Place. The Waterfords are shown to have been involved with the movement since the beginning, and Fred later finds out that the movement will attack the U.S. government. After the takeover, Serena is completely shut out and accepts her role in the totalitarian society she helped create. A copy of her book is seen being thrown out in the trash.
Yeah, what a powerful episode. I mean, I'm gonna say the same thing. I think for a lot of these ones, just you talking about it kind of gets me excited because this was a good one, and it includes a lot of material that isn't present in the book. Some of it is, some of it's hinted at, you know, some of it's sort of extrapolations, but a lot of good stuff here. No, you know, the delegation coming to the home, her interaction with this ambassador, the question of "Are you happy?" and the look on, you know, June's face while she's struggling to say that she is and lie.
Yeah. Some of the time I find myself like it's stretching believability that these people wouldn't pick up on the facial like reactions that they're giving sometimes.
But you have to remember that the camera is real fucking close. Whereas like in real life, you're standing across a room. So maybe the benefit of the doubt is maybe it's sometimes harder to tell. But I found myself saying the same thing. Like, can't you look at her face and tell that she's like, everything about her face is like, I fucking hate it here.
It's also one of those things where it's like if you ask somebody if they're happy and then they pause for like 30 seconds of somber silence, like I don't know that they're gonna like I don't know if you can believe them when they say they're happy.
But I will say that the show kind of addresses that because the ambassador even says like I don't know that she was fully fooled as much as she wanted to be. Like it seems like she wants to believe that, you know, she's happy or at least okay with her place. Maybe she doesn't know the full extent of the horror, but I don't know. Like she kind of says, "I can't help you" later on when the full truth is revealed, and it ends up being someone in her entourage that is able to help a little more.
I mean, they were there to basically start trade of handmaids as well. So it's like, like you said, she kind of wanted to believe it at some point and be like, oh, thank you for providing the service to save all these countries.
And that speaks to some real world shit, right? Like, I read that Afghanistan in particular was one of the societies that Margaret Atwood looked at a lot. And we know that especially under like Taliban rule, it's incredibly repressive and kind of similar to Gilead in some ways. And I do think there is a look the other way, turn a blind eye mentality in a lot of these countries looking to do business with people in the Middle East in particular, like countries in the Middle East that maybe have human rights violations and stuff like that going on. I know I'm getting into sort of real world politics. I'm not trying to infuse the show, but this show deals with this stuff, right?
And, I mean, that's the commentary she was making.
Right.
Some of it, yeah.
And my point being that, like, when your interests align, you can just look for an excuse to look the other way. Oh, this is what they're choosing this. This is their culture. And some of that can be true in some situations. I'm not trying to say it isn't, but sometimes it's also not true. And it's something that someone has to say because of reprisals, because of violence and threat. And, they could literally lose their lives if they speak out. So in situations like that, how can you ever trust what anybody says to you?
There's a part that's additional from the book. It's added in the show. And it's this flashback we get of Serena and Fred before the basically the Gilead wall falls down, goes up, I guess. And it's really interesting because you can start to see, like, even within the relationship, there's like a patriarchal dynamic, but not like it is obviously in Gilead. And like she's like, she's like helping him in his career, and it's like that's what they're focusing on. That's very important. And so like their dynamic was already structured like that. Whereas like, you can see in June and Luke's dynamic that seems to be more even. They seem to be sort of on a more even playing field.
Very different.
And but even so, it was interesting to see them like on a date. She has a lot more agency. She's telling him what to do, and like to see that was so powerful to for Serena's character later on in the season as well.
Her character's fascinating, and it is, I think, a further exploration of the character that exists in the book. She is this sort of personality, almost a celebrity in the book, somewhat the same in the show, right? She's written this book. And she clearly is sort of a conservative, a woman's place. Like a name like that for a book is very provocative, Mm-hmm. And domestic feminism, I believe, is what the ambassador called it. And you're like, what does that mean? And you just know that how that book was probably written, right? Like in theory, you can kind of imagine it. And it I don't know, it made me really intrigued, but also like I guess I lost some sympathy for her over the course of finding this out. I maintained some, but a lot of it was lost because it's like she worked so hard to build a prison for herself, and she worked so hard to create a society where she is stripped of all power, and then she's going to like dare to have the gall to be like frustrated and depressed in this society that she helped make. Like it's like, come on. It's like, oh, well, if it isn't the consequences of my own action, it's hard to feel too sorry for her.
And it seems like Serena and Fred along the way didn't really realize the beast that they were creating. And it starts to obviously come back to bite them in ways that Serena kind of should have seen coming, but they were so busy focusing on trying to make the world better and thinking that like their specific version of the world being that way would help. And like, I think you can argue that like it literally doesn't help. It probably does the opposite. Like,
oh, absolutely.
You know what I mean? Fertility rates are down, and I don't think that what they're doing is actually helping.
No, absolutely not. And you're right, because both of them are sort of shown as being perpetrators of this movement, yet definitely didn't fully appreciate exactly what they were unleashing, right? And it's interesting to see the divergence of the two roles because of the society they create. They are fairly equal in status within their relationship, it seems to me. And then she realizes how she is going to be shut out. She is excluded. She's not allowed to give she had some sort of speech she was going to give. It seemed like she had notes for. She's not allowed to do it.
Yeah, one of the most poignant moments was when they were like, "You're not even," one of the other wives says, like, "You're not even allowed to read your own book." Like, how does that
Yeah.
feel? Or maybe that was the ambassador that said that.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, how does it feel not to be able to read your own book? Yeah, and she's like, sacrifices must be made or something, and we can just tell that like that's what she tells herself, but it seems to me like she's lying to herself. I'm really curious to see where this character goes in following seasons because I think there's a lot of interesting potential there. And it's a cautionary tale, right? Like, think about who benefits because, you know, even though they both think they're doing this thing for God and for whatever, like, she's the one who gets subjugated, he's the one who gets elevated. And so
Yep.
she's the one who's now suffering while he's sort of enjoying the fruits of, everything that's gone on in his now status.
Like you said, it's a cautionary tale. Don't take up arms for a cause in such like and be like one-minded about it. Like, you have to be able to see different perspectives on it and stuff. And clearly she was just like, this is the way and there's no other. I don't know.
Yeah.
It obviously, and one of the funniest parts to me is that like Fred, and you can see with all of the high-ranking Gilead officials, basically, when they go off to Jezebel's and everything, like, this is their, like, they've all realized long ago that it's just a facade, and they've created this facade.
Oh, the hypocrisy is fully exposed as we continue on in the show. But another thing in this episode that happens is Serena Joy comes into June's room, and I think they're in the room, and they have a conversation, and she says, "You can leave," or something like that. And then there's a pause, and then she closes this mirror. And in the mirror, you see June is still standing there, hasn't moved. And I really think with their physicality, these little moments, they're really trying to show the shifting power dynamics in this relationship. And this is June pushing back, right? And she says something about red is my color, right? Like, she says something like that, right? Like, and it's referencing that red outfit, and it's sort of claiming it in a way. I also wanted to shout out, we got a comment, I think from Amanda, one of our listeners, on Instagram. Sorry if that wasn't who left the comment, but and she said that red in particular could be a reference to, it's sort of the color of harlots and, women that are considered, unsavory or loose women, right? Like the Scarlet Letter, things like that. And so that red could be literally like sex. And that red represents that, right? Which totally makes sense. Like the lady in a red dress and all that stuff that, you think about the Matrix, right? So it totally makes sense. And I think that is another thing that's going on with these handmade outfits for sure.
Yeah, I can totally see that. So episode 7 is called The Other Side. This episode chronicles Luke's story after he was separated from June and Hannah. Luke is shot and injured, but escapes when the ambulance crashes. He passes out from his wounds and is rescued by a resistance group traveling to Canada with many survivors, including Aaron, a mute escaped handmaid, and Zoe, the daughter of a U.S. Army soldier. Initially reluctant, Luke joins them after Zoe shows him that Gilead authorities hanged people from the rafters of their church for resisting. As they board a boat, Gilead guards kill several members of the group, but Luke and Aaron manage to survive. A further flashback shows Luke, June, and Hannah before they were separated. June and Luke are helped by Mr. Whitford, a man who knew June's mother. He leaves them at a secluded cabin in the woods while he arranges documentation for them to escape to Canada. However, he is caught and hanged, and a local hunter attempts to help them instead. 3 years later, in the present, Luke and Aaron live safely in Little America, based in Toronto. While in the main administrative office, Luke receives the letter from June, which reads, "I love you so much, save Hannah." Upon understanding that June is probably alive, Luke gets emotional.
Yeah. Before we talk about this episode, I just want to touch on one final scene from the previous one before we move on. The parading of the handmaid's children out at this big gathering was such a powerful moment. And the complete change in demeanor and expression of all these handmaids who were sort of enjoying being at this event, somewhat enjoying it. And then, just it's like the worst thing you could do. And I don't know, I thought that was a beautifully done moment that just really hit all the right emotional beats.
Yeah.
And
It's a reminder of the past and the freedom
Yeah.
and all of that.
and what's been taken from them, right? Like it's
Right.
it's almost, it's like a form of torture to just like have them have to sit there. And
The way that they leverage specifically June's child too,
Yeah.
it's fucking wild.
yeah. Okay, so yeah, episode 7. I wanted to ask you. You were mentioning that there's a bunch of women directors. Is this one of the ones directed by a man?
No, it's not.
It's not. Okay,
No.
interesting. They flipped the script on me. I thought maybe it was, because this is like completely Luke focused, right? Like it's the biggest departure from any other episode, in the sense that it's this sort of complete side story of what goes on with Luke, and I enjoyed it. Definitely not in the book, but that's okay for me. Like I'm fine with that. I enjoyed this episode. It is a little bit maybe expected in some ways. Like you kind of could fill in this storyline if you were asked to like guess at what happened. This might be what you come up with, but there's enough surprise in here. I like widening the lens on the world and seeing more of it, and we're definitely doing that here. So there's a lot to like here. There's this particular shot early on that I wrote down I thought was pretty amazing, and that was the ambulance flip scene, where the camera is like locked in place on him in the stretcher, and there's like people and just debris like flipping all around as the ambulance spirals. And I was like, how did they, like, it seems dangerous. It looks like he's really in the scene. Like, I don't know. I'm very curious how they would have pulled that one off, but props to them. It was a really good looking scene.
Probably a rig of some kind to like actually, like, the camera is stationary and they rotate like the ambulance around it or something like that.
Yeah. Some of that stuff might have been digital. Some of the debris, maybe it's filmed in slow motion, but then sped up. Like, isn't there like a clocking thing you can do to like film things at different speeds and then make it seem faster than it really was shot at and stuff like that?
Kind of, yeah. Frame rates and that.
Yeah,
That's
so maybe there was
some
some playing with that, like make it, because it was in slow motion, but maybe it was like originally kind of done slowly. I don't know. Just to keep it safe, right? Because they had to do it in some way that wasn't super dangerous.
Right. And then some of it also could have just been like augmented, like CG stuff.
Yeah. Well, and if they did, like, I didn't spot it, at least in that first pass, and that's all that really matters, right? Like, fool you that first time.
Right.
And I thought it looked good. And then, and I like the performance out of Luke here. I mean, this is all good stuff. And him hooking up with this group, right, was fascinating. We get, I don't know, it's like a little...
Doesn't it feel like a Walking Dead episode to you a little bit?
It does. Like, it's very this is like what you're used to in like a post-apocalypse man against society situation, like, and that's why I said like this felt more familiar. We've seen this kind of story play out, but it's interesting because he doesn't actually go back for her. He ends up escaping, and then the moment where the woman, I forget what her name was. You said it in the summary, but the main woman
Zoe?
he's been interacting with,
Aaron or Zoe? Zoe, I believe.
maybe Zoe, yeah. When she gets shot, I was shocked. I shouldn't have been. I have to, in retrospect, like, okay, that makes sense. But like in that moment, I was shocked, right? And it's this tragic moment where she gets gunned down. And
Yeah, and speaking of like affecting moments, that church scene when they walk in and all those people, that was gruesome.
his reaction is classic, right? Like, yeah, you see it on his face before it's revealed what he's looking at, which I think is always a powerful thing to do. And then, you only see it for a second, but I had to pause it. I went back and paused it because I wanted to read, and there's like all these like weird things written on the wall, and it's a very bizarre scene, like tableau that he views, very dark. And that, actually, we didn't even talk about the washing of the wall last episode with like washing blood off the wall. There's a lot of these like just really powerful moments. And yeah, they're very heavy-handed, but effective.
We also get the flashback of June and how it all went down. Like June and Luke and Hannah at this like cabin.
Well, we're getting more information throughout, right? Like, yeah, they go to this cabin. Clearly, like one of the happiest moments in his life. He keeps. We were talking about motivated, having motivated flashbacks last episode, and we get him here, but it's different because he is sort of in this like semi delusional state. He's clearly been wounded. He seems to be in and out of consciousness, and then we're getting more like dream-like memories, it seems like to me. And so in some sense it's less motivated, but it's more just like he's thinking of the good times, and then that leads him to think about what happened to end the good times. But I do like the misdirect with the hunter, right? Like where we think the hunter is, oh, he's like, oh, clearly he's, a member of the Gilead or whatever, but then he ends up not being, and he's the one who reveals that the other guy got strung up from a light pole or something, and just horrific, tells them that, that they know they're looking for the car and they need to leave. So yeah, I liked all of that. Very good stuff.
Yeah. I have to talk about the letter that June writes, because we don't know what she writes at first. She's like, she's told by this delegate's like assistant that like she needs to write something very quickly, and we cut away from that and go back to some other story. I think some of Luke's stuff, and then when we finally get it revealed is when he's in the office. Which again, I really like seeing Canada in present day, where like they have like also like just seeing them be like, here's your universal healthcare, here's your like all the things that they're just like immediately being like, this is what we do as a society, and like we're taking care of our own.
Yeah, we get more of that later on, which I definitely want to talk about.
Yeah, and so he goes into the office and he's like so excited. He has all this like materials, and he's got all these theories of where she's at and like what to do. Speaking with this authority from the Canadian government,
his daughter
and then,
specifically, he's looking for.
Right, and then he gets the letter. And what she wrote was so kick-ass, because like I think it was basically the perfect thing to write,
right?
Because it's so triumphant, and it's like, I love you, save Hannah. Yeah, is like, it's just the coolest thing. Like I just, and like his reaction is so genuine too. I love the way he reacts to it, and he's like, can I have a moment? She clears the room, and it's just powerful stuff.
Yeah, good stuff. And yeah, I mean, you only have a second to write something. It's believable that this is the kind of thing you would scrawl. So. Well done all around.
Episode 8 is called Jezebels. Commander Waterford gives June makeup and a dress and takes her out for the night. Nick drives them to Boston to an underground brothel where sex workers known as Jezebels work. June spots Moira and they briefly reunite. Nick trades drugs and pregnancy tests for alcohol with Beth, one of the brothel's Marthas. June goes to see Moira again, and she explains to June how Quakers tried to help her escape but were caught. Moira had the choice of being sent either to the colonies or one of the brothels. Moira tells June to forget about escaping, but June tells Moira that Luke got out. Flashbacks detail how Nick, struggling with unemployment and a troubled family, got involved with the Sons of Jacob and subsequently the Gilead movement, and how he became an eye after reporting a commander for breaking protocol with his handmaids. The suicide of the previous Offred is shown. In the present, Nick drives Waterford and June home. He ends his relationship with June, which upsets and angers her. The episode closes with June etching the words, "You were not alone," in the closet wall.
Yeah, this is the moment we've all been waiting for. If you've read the book, we get Jezebels, and very memorable section in the book. And it is so here too, because it fully displays the supreme hypocrisy of those at the top, right? And of course, I think the implication is there is a couple of true believers in the organization there who are at least willing to pretend that they are true believers. But the vast majority of them are doing this kind of stuff on the side. And yeah, I mean, Waterford just gets more and more detestable. He even says,
at the beginning of the episode, when he's like shaving her and like having her put makeup on and giving her, it was so disgusting.
Super creepy. And then she's like, so there's this amazing thing the show does with its score. There's this tone, and there's a name for it. I don't know the name of it, but it's like this descending tone. And I'm not sure that they always do this, but like the music, it's like the pitch is dropping, and it's dropping, and it's kind of over and over again. And they put it in these scenes where she's acting happy, right? Like she's acting like, oh, everything is fine. Yet the score is pulling you down emotionally. And it's a really interesting thing that you can do in a movie, right? That you can't do in a book. And you can use different tools in your toolbox to do this. Like I will have the character acting happy, portraying happy, saying happy things, but that score alone tells you what's really going on in the scene, right? So I think it's really cool how they use that. And then that's further backed up when Serena Joy gives her music box, which I loved because she plays it and it's like this hideous sounding discordant tune. Like I thought it was gonna be this little beautiful tinkling like thing, but no, it's all like out of tune and harsh sounding. And she talks about how it's a woman trapped in a box, but like I love that the music carries over because that discordant, out of tune sound is also in the score. And again, it just feels like something's wrong all the time.
That's what's really powerful about film, right? Is like you're combining the writing with the visuals with the auditory responses as well. And like it you can play with an audience like that. There's subliminal things that filmmakers will do, and this isn't that. This obviously isn't that subtle,
obvious, but yeah. I mean,
but it's done for effective reason because it does put you on edge. You feel that in your bones.
Absolutely. Another thing I was completely shocked to get, we had a flashback of Nick from before, and he's such an interesting character. Like he's so stoic, and it seems like one of his superpowers is his ability to like have an excellent poker face. Like he just doesn't react to anything. And he seems like to not have a lot of compunctions about a lot of stuff. This version of Nick seems a lot more on June's side and the side of Mayday, at least at the point we get to at the end of the season, than the Nick does in the book, in my opinion. To where we were talking about it earlier, when he tells her to get in the van, I trust Nick a lot more in the show than I trusted Nick in the book.
Yeah, definitely. I will say this Nick flashback, while I understand how he was able to fall in with these sons of a Jacob, it doesn't make him any more likable.
No,
if anything, it makes him like less likable.
It explains it. He seems like he was just like desperate for a job, and like he seems like a character who didn't care, and he benefits from being a man. So he isn't directly affected in the same way that all these women are, right? And he seems like he's one of these young guys who gets caught up in these extremist organizations just because it gives them something to do. Like it gives them purpose, it gives them a job, it gives them a sense of community that they don't have and they're sort of missing in their lives. And he got swept up in it despite not really being a true believer. Is more just like, I don't really care. It seems like he is, I don't know. I mean, we don't know enough about him to know why he is the way he is.
Yeah.
But it seems like he was sort of morally neutral. And if you're neutral, then you're going to align with the oppressor, right? Like that's something that you see time and again, because if you're not willing to actively stand against it, you're ultimately supporting it. And he does so here. Like he might tell himself, oh, I'm just being a driver or whatever, but he is still supporting it in a way and benefiting it in a way, even though he's not a commander himself or anything.
He's hearing the conversations that lead to the society eventually. So like he's pretty close to it.
You see him have a little bit of a reaction of like, ooh, I don't know about this, but like I'm too far in now. I just have to roll with it.
It's really interesting because it makes me think of like, you know, like you were just saying, like people without a purpose, people without a people to like a culture and like a group of people to identify with, get pulled into something like this. And then, but often you see it become their cause eventually because they feel like they now have ownership in it. And like the fact that he couldn't get a job and this is a job that he has now, he's like, well, I owe it to this job because it's paying me and I couldn't get a job anywhere else. So this is my people now. It makes me think of like kids who get pulled into the alt-right through like YouTube and shit. Like, you know what I mean? It's just somewhere that they can belong and say crazy stuff. And then,
I mean, these are all direct comparisons being made, right? Like going back to Margaret Atwood's original novel up to the point here, it's like, there's a reason we're getting so political. It's in what we're watching. It's in the text. And it's speaking about extremism and how, people get recruited to it. Absolutely. But it's also interesting to say that like Nick, although he's within this organization, it seems like he can be redeemed, right? In some way. And that's kind of what his story is about, and maybe finding a way to find redemption for himself. Yeah.
So we also got Moira again.
Yeah. So Moira again at Jezebel's. Jezebel's itself was quite a spectacle, and it is all the more shocking to see because we know how much everything that's happening here was said to be the like sin of society, everything that Gilead was against, and yet you're seeing it all on display here, just restricted and controlled and dominated by a very select few of commanders. And of course this is what happens.
Got to give a shout out to Margaret Atwood's original line being in the show where it was like, June asked like, who are all these people? And then Waterford's like, they're high senators and they're this and they're that. And she's like, I meant the women. Yeah. And it's just such a good moment. It's like, It's so powerful.
Yeah.
And it speaks volumes to Waterford, to June, to it's just the society in general.
Oh man, I groaned so much when he said to her, "We've got quite a collection here." It's like, Jesus Christ, dude.
Oh man.
And like he's the one especially where I'm like, are you not looking at her face? Like, can you not tell how she's reacting to the shit that you're saying?
A lot of times too. There's a point where he like kind of finally realizes that they're having sex, and she's like has no reaction, and he like has a reaction, and then she like fakes it or whatever.
Exactly.
And it's like to be that detached is for Waterford is insane.
Yeah.
So I did have something I wanted to talk about actually, and it's that there were no black characters in the original source novel.
Right.
And that's because like black people were forcibly resettled into the upper Midwest within the book. So the producers of the show made a conscious choice to deviate from that aspect of the book so that they would be able to include black characters and actors in the show. Bruce Miller explained that the producers engaged in a huge discussion with Margaret Atwood, and in some ways it is a TV versus book thing, arguing that in a TV show it would be harder than in a book to explain the persistent absence of black characters. He continued, "What's the difference between making a TV show about racists and making a racist TV show? Why would we be covering the story of Handmaid Offred rather than telling the story of people of color who got sent off to Nebraska?" He also justifies it by reporting that the evangelical movement has gotten a lot more integrated since the book's publication, and he made the decision that fertility trumped everything.
Yeah, as to why so that there's minority handmaids. Right. This completely makes sense. I think he's right on here. It's the right decision for the show, and it helps a lot of the potential criticisms I was reading out there about it. And I can see what Margaret Atwood was thinking. Like they're racists, and she was trying to include that. But I agree with what he's saying about like there is a fine line between trying to make a commentary about racism and having a racist show that doesn't include any black characters. I think they made the right decision. So, props to him for that one.
Yeah, I'm sure it wasn't just his decision. It sounds like all the producers, everybody was involved, but yeah, I agree.
So the episode ends with her in this argument with Nick, and they sort of are breaking up, right? And he says something about like, they could kill you for this. And she says, at least someone will remember me. Someone will care when I'm gone. And then she writes this, you are not alone message on the wall. And this further underlines to me the divergence of this character a little bit, right? Like there is this sense of wanting to be remembered in the journal that we're reading, which is essentially what we're reading in the book, in the sense that I'm writing this journal and you're right now reading it, so you are going to remember me. So June does want to tell her story, but this is more about like, I want to be remembered for my acts of rebellion. I want to make a difference in that way. And that is a subtle but significant divergence in the character that I think is going to lead to all sorts of different stuff down the road, is my guess.
Yeah, I mean, like, I don't want to comment too much, but basically, like, I agree with you. This show has repeatedly shown that she's, like, that more defiant character that's going to... And there keeps being these moments where she's sort of, like, walking in front of the handmaids, and they're, like, playing a song, and it's very, like... revolutionary.
I think next episode or something she says like if they didn't want us to be an army they shouldn't have given us uniforms. Right. Yeah,
becomes very like it feels like a revolution is brewing big time
with her sort of at the head of it.
Maybe
well at times. So another moment I have to say, in the kitchen they're having their argument and this freaking light is coming in the window. I kept noticing it after talking about it last week. Let me hit you with a vocabulary term: numinous. I felt like the light was numinous. It was evoking a divinity, and I kept thinking how these scenes like are being, the light of the Lord is like shining in, yet it's through shutters and it's blocked and
right. So is that like he's watching and doesn't agree with some of the things that are happening?
I don't know, man. And then there's like a moment, and there's like this moment later, I know it's not in this episode, where Serena Joy is clutching the pregnancy test and reacting. and
Oh,
she is
yeah.
completely bathed in this light. And I'm like, in every room they're in, there's just these beams of light. There's no natural, like they turn out all the actual lights, and there's just the lights through the windows. And then I can see them, I have like throwing smoke in the air or something. Like, how do they get these beams to look so crisp? I don't know. There's some sort of trick. Maybe it's something with a lens. It's probably all it is. But like, there's like texture to this light in a way. I have a picture which I'm going to post on Instagram at some point. I literally stopped and took a picture, and it's not the greatest quality because it's my phone, but like, of just a scene, and I was like, this is one of those moments where you can like look at the composition of what goes into a scene, right? And it looks like a piece of art. It's amazing, and it's just the light and the actor. It's pretty incredible.
And her performance in that moment too, she's like bowing down and then like throwing her arms out and like doing all this like very, I don't know, religious, almost like she's like it's just this like plea, obviously. Like this is the ultimate prayer that's like very evocative. But I mean this show is definitely shot in a way that like all of this holy stuff that you're picking up on, I see that as well. Yeah, for sure. Whether it's a commentary on it, like there actually being a god, or there, you know what I mean, like this, there's at least the implication that religion is powerful within this society. So I think that the lighting evokes like that sort of holy light, like you're saying. All right, so episode 9 is called The Bridge. Janine's daughter is handed over to Commander Putnam and his wife. Then Janine is transferred to another couple and renamed Of Daniel. During the first ceremony night with her new commander, Janine forcefully stops the proceedings. At the market, Alma tells June that she is involved with Mayday and requests that June retrieve a package from the bar at Jezebel's. June convinces Waterford to take her to Jezebel's again that night. Waterford presents June with Moira, and June privately asks Moira to retrieve the package, but she refuses. The next day, June is taken to a bridge where Janine is standing on the edge with baby Charlotte, while many, including the Putnams, stand fearfully by. Janine shouts that Commander Putnam promised to leave his wife for her. June convinces Janine to give her Charlotte, but Janine then jumps into the icy water. Later, while Janine lies comatose in the hospital, Commander Putnam is led away by guards. Mrs. Putnam causes Serena to doubt her husband's loyalty. At the market, June is given a package by the butcher, sent by Moira from Jezebel's. At the brothel, Moira kills a client and takes his clothes and then drives off in his car.
Right. So we didn't talk very much about Moira, how in the last episode it's revealed that she is sort of defeated. And June has this discussion with her where it seems like she's trying to convince her, but she pushes back and is like, just, you can't keep doing these things or you're going to get yourself killed. And it's not until this episode, I think, when they have the follow-up conversation where she finally says to her, don't let them wear you down. Because I wrote in my notes, I was like, she should tell her that quote, like maybe that could be important to her. And then I was just like getting my writer brain working, because sure enough, she does in the next episode. And I was like, there you go. There's that quote. You got to bring it back. And it was interesting that, she ends up regaining her will to fight back. That's a change from what we get in the book, at least as far as we know in the book, because in the book she sees her at Jezebel's, she's defeated, and that's the last time she ever sees her, right? There is no return to Jezebel's, I don't believe, in the book. So that is fully added. This mission to go get this package, this has all been added. She doesn't do this for Mayday in the book. Again, this is all an expansion and an additional material, but I find it interesting, right? Like I'm bought into the story the show is telling. I'm not too beholden to what I read in the book, so I'm enjoying this. Ufglen and her tragic tale, right? Like she gets reassigned. Now, again, I wish I had a better memory for these details, but I think in the book there's an implication that they get to like retire or something after they have a baby. There was some sort of reward, and they were going to go in, I think they go in this van, but I think they're supposedly taking them somewhere where they just get to like live in a retirement home or something. I don't remember exactly what this like promised reward was, but I don't think that we know that they just get reassigned to another commander. Like I don't remember that being in the book. It totally makes sense, and I absolutely believe that the society would do that, especially if it's like you're still fertile, you can still have babies, so they're going to do that. But seeing it play out was heart-wrenching. And then
it was brutal.
They make this character Janine so like naive and childlike that you really do feel sorry for her, and that she's been sort of duped into believing that the commander's going to actually come for her. And
well, and she seems like within all the handmaids that we've met, she seems like the one that needs to be taken care of the most.
She's like,
they keep having to talk
clearly.
her down when she's saying things, and she had her eye gouged out for what, before, like, just for, I guess, speaking out like that,
I think
right?
just acting out in the Red Center or whatever originally. And so, and then of course where that ends up going, the bridge scene, and Glenn having a moment to save the baby. I definitely predicted she was going to jump in the river. I was like, she's gone, and she does. But I was then surprised when she was pulled out of the river and still alive in the hospital room. That was a twist. So.
What do you think of that? Would you have rather seen her die there? Would that have more of an impact on June?
I think this was more interesting ultimately, because I was expecting her to just die there. This was actually even more horrific, right? Like, you can't escape. Even in this attempt, she couldn't escape. And it makes it that much more horrifying. Like, she doesn't even have the ability to kill herself. So I think her name's Rita, or she is a Rita. I'm not really sure. The character in the household has this interaction with Serena, who wakes up in the middle of the night, wants to have a drink while they're gone. And they have this moment where they're chatting with each other and sharing whiskey. And this Rita character reveals that her son died in the war. And Serena, says something about like his sacrifice and all this stuff. And it lends like some clarity as to why she is so obsessed with a baby actually coming into the world.
Yeah.
But it was interesting to me because I was like, what side was the son fighting for? It's not said, right? Like, the implication is maybe for Gilead, but it's not really said. So it could be anything. I don't know. And then just, again, this was another moment where I was like, torn, because I want to feel sorry for Serena Joy on some level, but like, she has done this to herself, and it's so hard for me to find sympathy for her.
Yeah, I think that there will be people who find sympathy for her, but it's hard for me too.
Yeah.
I will admit that it's really tough for me.
She's a complicated character, and like I there are moments where I want to like her, but then she'll turn around and do something just so fucking heinous that it's really hard. So, yeah.
You mentioned Rita, and I wanted to give a shout out to Amanda Brugel, because like I think she's great as like a Martha in the house, and she plays this like double-sided thing.
Okay, so the name of they're Marthas, and her name is Rita. Okay, yeah. Sorry, I don't have a great head for some of these details, so I got those two things mixed up.
The entire show, Rita, the Martha, has been kind of like standoffish towards June, and like they start to warm up to each other a little bit more over time, but then you see that like she kind of holds some stuff back from Serena as well. Yeah. So she's still like kind of in the middle.
Well, she let slip about him not being home. And so at the end of the episode, we get Moira driving away, and we're like, oh shit, what's going to happen with that? But maybe even more oh shit moment is Serena finds out what's been going on, and she goes, I think she pushes into his office towards the end. And there's these moments of like, oh, what's she going to do? Because she is quite an intimidating figure when she wants to be, and so I was really interested to see like, how does that come up against all the power that society has given to her husband, right?
Well, we're seeing like Putnam get taken away and shit too.
Yeah,
so like we know things are possible.
We're about to get into. I want to talk all about that in episode 10.
Yeah, shout out to Amanda Brugel, because I love her also in Kim's Convenience. She plays like this pastor or priest or something.
I never heard of that show. Movie?
It's great. It's great. It's a sitcom about a Korean family, and they own this convenience store, and it's just like a really fun, light comedy. Simu Liu from Shang-Chi is the brother in that show.
Oh, cool.
And that was kind of his big start, and it's really fun. It's a really fun show, but she's hilarious in that show.
His TikToks are fun.
He's the man. Simu Liu is the man. So episode 10 is called Night. A flashback shows June's capture and indoctrination by Aunt Lydia at the Red Center. In the present, after discovering Commander Fred's trips to Jezebel, Serena forces June to take a pregnancy test, which ends up being positive. Serena angrily accuses Fred, telling him that the child is not his. After learning the news, Nick and June have a tender moment. Serena takes June to see Hannah, but leaves her in the car. Serena warns June that Hannah will be safe as long as June's unborn child is. Following his show trial, Commander Putnam's left arm is amputated below the elbow. The package from Jezebel's contains letters from women who have lost family members and have been enslaved in the Gilead takeover. Later, an emotional Aunt Lydia gathers the handmaids and instructs them to stone Janine. The handmaids hesitate, and eventually June and the others refuse, dropping their stones. Following this, a black van comes for June, something the Waterfords were unaware of. Nick urges her to trust him and go with them. As June leaves, she whispers to Rita where to find the hidden letters. Meanwhile, Moira reaches Canada, is granted asylum, and is reunited with Luke.
Okay, what an episode. This is, a lot of times you get sort of the big iconic episode at like episode 8 or 9 in a season, but like this is, to me, this goes right up to episode 10. This is the big payoff of the season, and it delivers on so many things. But I got to go all the way back to the start with the flashback of her arrival at the Red Center and getting her ear tagged in a horrific scene with this like clearly used for cattle or something ear tagging device, and which is just cruel, right? And it's horrific. And then
it's the first time that that June's seen it used immediately on her, like almost right away. So it's like,
and shocking. So I mean, I'd noticed this tag elsewhere, but like getting the actual scene of it was definitely striking. So Aunt Lydia, there's been a few interesting moments throughout these episodes where it's clear that Aunt Lydia cares for the handmaids in a way. She seems to me to be a true believer in the cause. Like, she is sort of wrapped up in her righteous belief, and she truly believes in sacrifice and things like that. Like, she has the danger of a true believer. And yet she feels some sort of weird kinship with them. I don't know. She much like in The Leftovers, Ann Dowd plays a character that starts off as just completely reprehensible, and then you kind of get interested in, and you're like, what's going on here? Right. And I don't know if there's anything redeemable about Aunt Lydia, but like, she rounded out the character in a way that I found fascinating. And like, there's some actual human motivations beneath the surface. She's not just a monster, even though the thing she does is monstrous.
Yeah, they give her a couple moments to like really sit with some reaction shots, and she almost has tears in her eyes sometimes when like, and you're like, is this because she's so furious? Is this because she cares? Is it because she sees, specifically at the end, does she see the humanity of all of these handmaids coming together to save one of their own? Or is she just like completely furious?
And I think the first moment I really took note of it was, I think, episode 6, where all of the handmaids are lined up and Serena comes in and identifies the damaged ones and says they can't come in. And she, I think, has tears in her eyes in this moment. And she's like, they are all equal in the eyes of the Lord. Like, that's not right. And she's like, yeah, but you don't put the bruised apple on top of the bunch. You can tell that, like, she genuinely is upset at the implication she says, that they're like, less than because they've been injured in some way, which is an interesting distinction to make, and it shows you how her head must work, right?
Well, and she's doing the maiming.
Exactly. And she's like, to her, it's a righteous thing, and that it's not shameful, and that's in the way that Serena is making it out to be.
And she tells Janine that she's going to give her like extra portions of ice cream or something or whatever, and like that like shows that there's something there that, well, because like they're finally going to get celebrated, and it seems like she in some way believes that is that they should be celebrated, even though she fully like is the hand that keeps them subjugated. It's really interesting. I don't know, man. Like, she's a completely reprehensible character, but these little cracks of humanity are just fascinating to me. So let's move on to the next part. Serena slaps her so hard she slams her face into like a door frame. Violent moment, and then she's just like screaming at her. Clearly she's like confused and bleeding, and forces her to do this pregnancy test. And again, we're talking about the staging, standing over her while she's like forcing her to pee on this thing. And like, this is a reassertion of power from Serena Joy to me. And she is furious with her and blames her in this moment, at least ostensibly, for everything that's been going on with her husband. Definitely. Yeah, definitely. She thinks that she like tempted, he like was tempted away. And then the 180 is the craziest part. So we talked about the praying with the pregnancy test on the ground with the hands and the light and everything. And then it comes back positive. And then the 180 flip. She comes in and is like, I'll be the nicest person in the world to you.
Yeah. So bizarre. And again, shows that like she really wants a baby is the thing I kept coming back to. It's like Serena just really wants a baby. And I feel like that's what she's convinced herself that like this is the way that she's going to get a baby. And she's every bit as out of her mind as that woman who showed up to steal the baby from the hospital.
Honestly, I think it's because her character has now realized that if it was all for the fertility and the pregnancy and everything like that, then they have to have a child to make it all worth something. She has to be going through the things she's going through, and she's going to feel better about herself if it means she did get to the point where she has a child versus living in the like, at least at some point she has a reward that comes out of all this pain that she's caused herself. So yeah,
but man, when she's filled with this righteous fury and she goes into the commander, like it's hard not to cheer for her a little bit in these moments, because she comes right into his office and he's like, oh, hello dear, what's going on? I've had a long day. And she's like, she's already in there. That's what it is. She's like talking about the game. She knows that he's lying. She calls him on his bullshit. And he quotes the law to her, and she's like, I helped write that law. Like, she's like asserting, like I have this power that, and like, don't you deny it to me. And then of course she drops the bombshell when that June is pregnant, and yet she says it's not yours. You could never father a baby. You're unworthy. God would never allow it, or whatever. It's like some of the harshest shit I'm sure you could say to him. And then she leaves. And I think it's so important, and it's such good work being done by the show. They had to show that there are cracks in the armor for Fred for this scene to work, because we have to realize that Fred is not all powerful. And the way that he is shown to not be all powerful is what happens to that other commander. He is at the hearing. He wants to laugh it off. Oh, which of us hasn't made a little silly mistake? No big deal. Because he's being convicted for the same shit that he's been doing, basically. And when that guy ends up losing his fucking hand and arm...
well, and you have to also highlight the fact that the other commanders like turned on him. Like, he was the one laughing, and all the other commanders were like, what the fuck are you talking about? Like,
well, especially that one guy who seems to be the real true believer, yeah. Who's the guy that like Nick works for or something, maybe? Yeah.
And so he's like, what are you talking about? Like, she wants to push for the harshest penalty or whatever.
Well, and that's another key, right? It's the wife. It's the wife that does the husband in. And I think in that moment, he is recognizing, oh shit, my wife does have power. And if this shit comes out and my wife is as cutthroat as maybe June said, which there was a brilliant moment where she says, you don't know her, about his own wife, which I thought was awesome. I think he actually feels fear in this moment, right? And that's why she can talk to him the way that she does, I think. And he can't do anything about it because he knows like she does have the ability to touch him in this way. And that's really cleverly set up, right? Because otherwise we wouldn't necessarily believe it. We're like, he doesn't, like, you couldn't say this to him, but like the show does a good job of setting up why she can. And
we see Putnam's like amputation.
What a fucking horror show that was, right? It's just that like medical horror that is, and anytime you're chopping off a limb, it's just, oh.
Well, it was surgical, and it's not like it needed to happen, and you're just like,
oh yeah, completely healthy limb. You're just removing it, and the fucking blood squirting everywhere, and they got this fucking saw, and it's stuff of nightmares for sure. But it also is such a distinct difference between this moment and what we saw with the cattle tagging. Right, one was in a dirty room with a fucking like generator, like they're having to fuck with the power to get it even running, and it's like,
right.
And then he's in this pristine surgical medical situation. He's sedated so that he's just gonna wake up absent the arm, but he's not experiencing the pain of it. Whereas the tag was just done. So like, it even shows that like in punishment how the different genders are dealt with in this society, and how even that's not fair.
Yeah. One of the most powerful, and honestly, it comes back to that whole, like, if they didn't want us to form an army. They shouldn't have given us uniforms. All that stuff comes down to this package that's so important that she needs to get.
I was like, are they going to show what this package is? Is it going to be kind of a Pulp Fiction, like Golden? Is it just a MacGuffin of some kind that it's not really important what it is? She hints at it maybe being a bomb, and I was like, okay, they're going to go that route. Then I was surprised when she actually opens it. I was like, all right, they got to make a decision here. What are they going to go with? And they go with, it's full of letters, and I thought it was brilliant. It's not in the book. This connects her to all these women all over Gilead who are struggling in her same situation. And it's that message she had of "you are not alone" is now being spoken back to her. And
like 1,000 times.
1,000 times. It's powerful. And I love that moment. I love that she passes the letters on to Rita. It's interesting that she trusts her, but maybe she doesn't have any real choice in the matter. And it'll be interesting to see if in season 2 they address that, like what happens with these letters or what happens with Rita once she finds them. Very curious.
And so that all of them coming together, all the handmaids, like the power that they represent together, goes into the scene with the handmaids, and they're being asked to stone Janine. I guessed that this where that scene was going. I was like, she's gonna drop the stone. She's gonna be the first one. It is what happens, but it was great. It was great. And then what an amazing looking scene. Just the red and then the swirling snow. And this motif of red and white together just is continued on and put on display. And then there's a shot of all the handmaids walking away, and the snow's just swirling, and it's like in slow motion. And I was just like, God, this is just beautiful stuff. Yeah, it looks amazing. I'm always a sucker for like the "I'm Spartacus" moment in like almost anything, where like everyone as a group together, like without saying anything, decides like this is what we're gonna do.
And I'm sorry, Aunt Lydia. They each say in turn, which is interesting because like they know there's gonna be reprisals for this, and that's said. Like there will be punishment.
And I love Janine's reaction too when she when everybody's walking away from her and she's just still there, and she's like, I can't she was like, don't throw him too hard or whatever.
Yeah,
which is just
heartbreaking thing to say. What is one of the most heartbreaking things she can say? Again, she's so childlike, right?
And then we get her reaction after they're walking away, having saved her, and she's like, what's gonna happen? We don't know what's gonna happen to her. So.
You can't imagine it's gonna save her. So ultimately, it's more about. It's like a battle over their own souls, right? It's like you can't force me to do this. And I talked about it early on our show coverage, right? Like this making someone complicit in what's going on by including them in some sort of ceremonial violence. And that's clearly what they've been doing, but here they push their hand too far, and they think, she thinks that she can get them to do this. And Aunt Lydia, I think, has shown just enough chinks in her armor to where we buy that maybe in this moment, she doesn't, I don't know, have them all maimed or something immediately, right? Specifically in that moment, their strength and unity and power, all of them say no together. Now, yeah, they could have all been gunned down, but ultimately, again, they have a certain role that has some power in the society. They are the fertile women, so you're not going to necessarily gun down a group of 30 of them. I assume that's a pretty big thing to do.
Right. And so Nick comes in the middle of the night with the van, and the implication is one of two things. Either Aunt Lydia has sent, which is kind of what's implied, Aunt Lydia is sent for them to go grab them, or Nick is forming some sort of escape plan, something like that.
But I guess he could just be saying, it's not worth fighting over this.
The thing that really amps up the scene is that Fred and Serena are what's going on? Hey, give her back. And they have no power in that moment.
Yeah.
And then this machine is just the machine that they created is just taking away their baby, basically, right then.
Yeah, there's definitely a big, that is something the show keeps touching back on, right? Of the society that they think they have control over, they don't actually have control over it. Nobody does.
Right.
And there is a certain, you can look at these sort of situations where these societies tend to eat themselves, right? And no one is safe. No one is necessarily exempt. Certain people are more likely to be exempt, but everybody suffers to an extent.
What kind of a life is it if you're always looking over your shoulder? That's how the society what it ultimately crumbles into.
At some point, you could find yourself in the crosshairs of it, right? For just the smallest infraction. But yeah, you're right. This is an interesting scene, and I do think the difference. I was touching on this earlier, but one of the biggest differences is Nick in the show. I think we trust more than Nick in the book. We know more about him, for one. Their relationship is given more screen time. So when he tells her to get in the van, I trust him more. I want to think that this is, I don't know, maybe Mayday in some fashion. Well, I guess I'll find out in season 2 because I definitely want to watch it. But it is a difference, right? So the show ostensibly ends in the same place as the book, yet there is a subtle difference, and I think it's more hopeful than necessarily the book was. Now, there isn't a bonus scene in the book where you're getting this like 150 years later, and there's like a professor, if you haven't read the book, you're like, what the fuck? Who's like talking about the Gilead period, and it's an academic breakdown of it, and it's talking about the distance and how, you know, societies might be doomed to repeat their mistakes, and very interesting section of the book that obviously isn't present here. But as far as this part of the story is all ostensibly similar here at the end. One thing we have to talk about, though, is Moira arriving in Canada. And getting sort of taken up in this refugee system. And she sees like stuff written on the walls about supporting refugees. She's, they're asking her if she has any family. She says no. And they're like, oh, well, you might be reassigned to another country. But then, yeah, he's like giving her, oh, here's your healthcare. Here's some food. Here's some money. Here's clothes, like all the stuff she hasn't had. And she's just stunned. She's in shock. And we don't see her come out of it until later on when we see her interact with Luke again, and there's a really touching moment where he says, you're on my list, and she says, you know, my list of family, and he says yes or whatever. So like she breaks down because she didn't know if he would consider her that, I think is the implication. And it's a really touching moment, and I want to highlight it because in our country right now there is a big thing going on in Texas with Haitian refugees who are fleeing from their prime minister or president, I'm not sure the role, but was assassinated. And there's this big coup going on in their country, and then there was this earthquake. And so they're fleeing from horrific violence and just conditions that are unlivable for many people. And they're fleeing to America because America is this hope at a better life and a hope at, being saved. And I know this is a tricky subject. I know that the sheer number of people, something has to be done with them. Like, you can't, there has to be infrastructure in place, and there has to be rules about how this is done. But what we've been seeing, if you look on Twitter, it's like there's just horrific stuff happening. Like people getting chased down from horseback, people getting whipped, people getting driven out, and it's horrifying, and I couldn't help but think of it when I'm watching this, and it's like, this is a good reminder of what people are fleeing from. Once again, very complicated issue. Immigration has a lot of different things that you have to consider. But ultimately, I think at the heart of it, you have to show empathy and recognize the humanity of these people and recognize the situations they're fleeing. And, being a refugee from a country that is oppressive, like, this is basic human rights stuff. And I just think if we're the country that we like to believe we are, then we need to find a way to help these people. What exactly that looks like, I don't know. And again, I'm not a politician. It's just me reacting to some stuff I've seen online. But like this show, honestly, I think they're directly dealing with this, right? Because, the treatment of refugees was an ongoing problem throughout all of the previous presidency and continues to be a problem here in what's going on in Texas. I think this is deliberately set up to put us in the shoes of a refugee, because we feel for Moira here, and we are so relieved that she has found this moment to be saved, right? But like, that's not possible for so many people, especially people who come to America, unfortunately. So yeah. Anyway, I just felt like we had to touch on that sort of current event. Again, it's weird how it aligned.
Well, it is great for perspective changing too. Like you said, like hopefully someone that doesn't necessarily feel that way about immigrants in general sees that and says like, oh, people.
Yeah.
Humanity, like there's there like I know that people say like just, everyone's a person, but realistically, like put yourself in those shoes, like think about it.
Yeah.
Everyone's everyone has a right to live.
Yeah. And refugees are often fleeing just some unimaginable stuff, and they're not just here on a whim, despite what you might hear. Yeah. Anyway, we have to make a final decision about which version of this story ultimately was best in our opinions for each of us. Do you want to start?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. We are just judging first season here because I don't have the rest of the show, so I'm not going to judge that.
Right.
Just first season.
Just the first season. Yeah. So it's not easy for me, but it is clear, I think, to me. Like, and I may be biased because it's the first way that I saw it, but I prefer the TV show and the way that everything plays out. I think it took the opportunity to address some of the things that we didn't necessarily love from the book. It took some of the best details from the book and sort of extrapolated them out. And then also just found its own story to tell. It sort of is telling a story of revolution in ways maybe, or defiance against like totalitarian regimes. To see June become like this beacon of like resistance almost as we're going towards this. I think that it's powerful for the time that it was coming out, especially season 1. And it, I've talked about how like that it's come to like the Handmaid's uniform has come to represent a lot outside of just the show. And it sticks with me. It's one of the best shows on TV. This first season is incredible. I think it's really well acted, performed, shot. We've talked about how amazing it looks. It's just the attention to details there, like in every facet. And it's not to take away from what Margaret Atwood did with the novel, because a lot of the best parts come straight. Realistically, the whole story comes from her. So props for that. But ultimately, I'm taking the show. The
show is pretty incredible, honestly. I've sort of raved about the look of it. The performances are memorable. Just, honestly, it's a spectacular season of television. I really enjoyed watching it. Excited for season 2. But when it comes down to measuring it against the novel by Atwood's storytelling is really elegant and subtle, and she approaches the material with the ear of a poet and the sensibilities that she has to sort of approach this incredibly heart-wrenching, horrific material is such a unique perspective. And she created a book in the 80s that feels timeless and will continue to feel timeless as long as these sort of poisonous, repressive ideologies stick around, which, maybe forever, unfortunately. Who knows? And I think that's like an incredible achievement as an author. And one of the things that many authors will never be able to even dream of pulling off. So for me, I got to give it to the book. I think it is a different story in many ways than the show, and self-contained. It has a deliberate purpose and a deliberate message and a sort of unity of vision throughout that makes a very powerful piece of literature that I think should be taught in classrooms. It's incredible. And ultimately, I do believe that this show is very important, and the time in which it came out is very important. 100 years from now, 200 years from now, I think people are still going to be coming back to this book. And maybe we'll see more adaptations of it down the road. But I think you got to go back to the source on this one. It's just so well made. So I'm going to give it to Atwood as my preference, with the caveat of I do really enjoy this show, and I'm definitely going to check out season 2. Maybe we'll talk about season 2 in like a bonus episode or something, because I'm going to be watching that one for sure.
Yeah, I feel like we have to, because to continue this journey, I think we need to.
It's
and
so
I don't
hard
fault
to
you for
choose, man.
taking Atwood. Yeah, it feels dirty sometimes, but like typically when it ends up you picking the book and me picking the show or the movie, like I'm like, yeah, go figure.
That feels right? Like a split decision. I'm kind of glad you didn't also pick the book, because I do think this show needs some love, especially this first season. I really liked it. If you enjoyed this episode, please let us know in the form of a rating and review. If you enjoyed this coverage, honestly, in general, let us know that way. If you're on YouTube, leave us a comment. Whatever platform you're on, find a way to shout us out, tell a friend, all that good stuff. We're not a very big podcast. So we definitely rely on word of mouth. So we would love it if you tell your friends, tell people you know who like The Handmaid's Tale about this coverage.
Yeah, and if you'd like to support us another way, we do have a Patreon. It's patreon.com/ink2film. It's definitely helped to keep the lights on here. And we have many different tiers, but our $2 tier gives you our bonus episodes, which we put out one monthly. Recently we did Neverending Story 2, which was an experience. And we try to mix things up over there. We've done some video content as well, and we'll continue to do all kinds of stuff.
And we mentioned that there is another Handmaid's Tale adaptation out there. I think in our last episode, there's a film, and it came out in the 90s, I want to say. We might very well cover that as a bonus episode. So if you want to catch that, Patreon is where to go. If you wanted to connect with us, we're on social media at Ink2Film on Twitter, Instagram, and on Facebook.
Thank you to Ross Bugden for the use of our intro and outro music.
All right, so next week we are getting to our 200th episode. That's a lot. That's a lot of episodes of podcast. A lot of episodes talking about adaptations. We're going to take a week to reflect on that. If you would like to get in your responses, where you let us know a favorite moment or favorite episode, please get those in basically as soon as possible, because we record fairly early in the week. So as soon as you hear this, if you're interested in participating, send it on over to ink2film@gmail.com, or you can even just post it in a comment on one of our social medias or something. Just get it to us in some way. And yeah, we want to include those. I think we're also going to play some games. We have some ideas about that. So hopefully there'll be some surprises there for you. And yeah, it's going to be more relaxed fit kind of episode, but we hope you celebrate with us. Truly, even if you just listened for the first episode or first project of ours, we consider you part of our journey, and we'd love to have you next week for that episode.
Thank you everybody for listening for 199 episodes and on to 200.
Yeah. All right. Until next time.
Keep adapting.